Yeah. He picks up speed fast. You'll see.
Nathan is like, oh, I
It's
cannot
amazing.
wait to get in here.
Now, what kind of things did they give you leeway on? Were you allowed to mess with the gearing
We have a
ratio,
lot of
stuff like
leeway. And frankly, this is part of the test and tune event on Saturday, so try to figure out what works best. One of the things simply is the width of the rear tires in the front. There are spacers there, so we can play a little bit with the width. We can play with placement of the weight, so we can move it forward. We had a mount at just center, just to kind of start there. We can mess with the placement of the seat, you know, up and down, which affects weight. There are different setups for the front end to adjust camber and the toe. Right now, we're towed in at 1 millimeter out, right? Each side.
Yeah, 1 millimeter each side.
Yeah. So we're just kind of setting it up neutral, if you will, and then we'll go and experiment if we need to adjust toe or the camber. Or, the other thing is the motor controller, that blue box. We can plug a laptop into it, and we can change a lot of the settings on there. How quickly the acceleration rate is, what the top voltage usage is. There's all kinds of different things that we can play with. And so when we get to the test and tune Saturday, they're actually going to hook up kind of a black box on here that will plug right into that system, and it will monitor the energy used, the acceleration, where you are on the track. And then when we go home, we'll have, I suppose, a flash drive or something, all that on there, so we can look at where are we losing energy, where are we on the plus side, where are we slow, where are we fast. We're going to check the heat of the tires as we come off the track. We have a gun, Jackson, I think, probably got in his pocket, so, to check heat, just like you would on the NASCAR, to see if you're wearing more on the outside or the inside, and so do we need to change setups. And so, I mean, this is all so new to us. We're babies when it comes as far as learning.
What kind of challenges did you boys run into as you were trying to figure this out? I heard there were no instructions.
Yeah, there were no instructions, and some of the parts were wrong
Or not there.
or not there. And
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
and then this motor
fit
mount,
right.
yeah, the motor mount did not fit. The holes were in the completely wrong spot, so I had to get one.
Yeah, there were actually two parts to the motor mount. So there's the part that bolts to the frame rails, and then there's the part that the motor actually mounts to, and that part mounts to the brackets that go on the frame rails. Well, the brackets that fit on the frame rails were actually manufactured wrong. They were die cast with an ear that came off and hit the frame rail and bumped it up. We wound up having to contact Top Kart, and we got a new one where those ears had been machined off. But the holes on the mount that the motor actually bolts up to were in the wrong position, so when we went to put the bolts on the underside and the nuts on top, the nuts actually came into contact with the motor. They wouldn't fit. So I wound up taking that into the machine trades vocational class that I'm in, and I located those holes and I moved them over a ½ inch and re-drilled them so that we could mount it correctly and we wouldn't have any interference on that part.
And Noah, you might also talk about the plates that you made for the front.
So when we went to Top Kart and we looked at how they were aligning their front wheels, they had this tool. They had one sit here and one sit here. They had a little graph on each side with lasers that pointed across. And you would use that tool to align your toe and camber on your front end to align the tires so that they were either straight or kicked out just a little bit. Instead of buying one of those tools, what we wound up doing was looking at a template that Top Kart had. It was a circle with a line across the top. It was like a semicircle, except it had more of the circle thing. It was about 3/4 of a circle. And I wound up taking that in and doing that in shop class as well, so that we could take that level part across the top and we could measure from the front end to the front end and the back end to the back end to set our toe and camber without having to purchase that tool.
Here's the plates that he made to fit on the front. So without the wheels on, you basically bolt those on, and then you can tell if you're in or out by just putting a tape measure across it. So there was a whole
with handling and everything within
Yeah.
the front end.
Yeah, it was funny. There was a whole lot of, as we worked on this, there was a whole lot of standing around staring at it, pondering, trying to remember what we heard at the training, and then a moment of inspiration would come, this is what we do, and so we would do that, and then we'd stand back and we'd look at it, wonder for 15 more minutes, and then we'd figure it out, and it was frustrating because we just didn't have a lot of instructions or that sort of thing.
Yeah, there were like a lot of things that like we made work that just didn't really seem quite right. Like the switch didn't fit in the hole; we had to drill that out. And the e-stop switch doesn't really have a mounting bracket that's very good.
Mhm.
Yeah, and a couple other things.
Jack described it, I think, at one point as it's like trying to make a puzzle from a blank box with no picture what the puzzle's supposed to look like, and then you start working on the puzzle and you realize there's 3 or 4 puzzles blended together and some of the pieces are missing. That's kind of what it was like. But
I heard there was a scary situation that happened
Yeah, that was-
during construction. Does anybody want to share that story? Or is that going to be kept in the shop?
well, all the great minds would say that you learn more from failure than you do from success, and so
It was a success, kind of.
we had to learn. One of the things that we learned is if you want to test if the motor runs, you don't bypass all the other things and just hardwire it right to the motor and immediately put 48 volts on that motor.
Yeah, it tends to jump about 2 feet that way.
It'll also arc out between the battery cable and the battery, but
Yeah.
start to weld it to the battery
I think
and burn
if you
through the
look-
terminal.
Where is it? This one right there. Yeah, it's melted a little bit right there.
There will be a large
Alright,
dead flash, and
There'll
you'll
be a
probably
large-
pee yourself a little bit.
Yeah, it's exciting when that happens.
So now,
No.
you're actually racing on the actual 2.5 mile
No.
oval? No,
In
inside,
a parking lot.
in the parking lot at the IMS, okay.
Sounds cooler when you just say at the iron.
Yeah, we leave out the
Yes.
parking lot, yes, but it is literally in the shadow of the stands. And
Yeah.
we should be able to hear the cars in practicing, so that'd be neat.
The best moment was when we like got everything hooked up, and like all of this wasn't bolted down. All this stuff was just like exploding off of it, and then like a super like rat's nest of wires, and then just like see a little green light come on. It's like whoa.
When the green light came on, that was big, wasn't it?
That was a big step.
Yeah, because
click.
when we hooked it up, the first time, you see the little green light there? That tells you that the system is all functioning and ready to go. But if there's a fault somewhere in there, it'll flash a series of lights. And there's about 15 different sequences that it might be. For example, I think when we turned it on, it was like 2 green, 3
3
red,
red.
2 green, 3 red, and it kept flashing that. So we had to look up in the manual, what does that mean? Well, we had the top voltage set a little high, so I went in on the laptop, drug that setting down just a little bit, and when I hit send setting, it sent the settings to the system, and then the green light came on, and it stayed on. I'm like, what does that mean? The green light's on. Is it ready? So I said, all right, Jack, push the accelerator, see what happens, and it turned the wheels.
Oh yeah, and these things, which we still don't know, they were like when there were 6 wires coming out of this the throttle control box. We only need 2, so don't even know what that's about. They're just zip tied standing there, so that's another.
Yeah, they weren't on the wiring diagram, as
Yeah.
I recall.
It just doesn't make sense. I ended up taking 2 of them out. Yeah, it was weird. It was very weird. Very confusing.
We still have some things that we need to do. One of the things we need to do is check the distribution of the weight, front and back. I think it's supposed to be no more than 60% on the back tires, 40% on the front. And so, how would you do that? Well, you get 4 bathroom scales and you set it on there and see what it weighs. So we need to check that and see how we're set up to make sure that we pass inspection. All of the critical linkages on the steering, suspension, all that have safety clips on them, so that if that nut starts to work its way loose, it can't physically come off because of that clip, and they shorted us some clips, so we're gonna have to get some clips on there before Saturday. I noticed there's a couple back here somewhere. Where did I see them?
Yeah. And now we're having a problem with the brake for some reason. I don't know what that's about.
Yeah, so, a few things yet to figure out.
And one of the most important pieces is the seat, because all the chassis hooks up and it's all kind of loose until it meets together at that center point. And so if there's any problems steering or, you know, distribution wise, it could easily be a problem with the seat, and you can feel it when we get it on the ground and you start turning the wheel, you can feel the whole chassis flex and twist a little bit. And when you're taking a corner at speed, you actually want the inside rear tire will come off the ground just a little bit. So it's all putting all that force and weight, you know, on the front opposite, and then the other two tires, of course. But so if we run into any issues, that may be one of the things we want to unbolt that seat, readjust it, and make sure it's not pulling one side too tight or
It sounds like a lot of adjustments have to be
Yeah.
made to the driver almost to
Yeah.
fine tune it.
One of the things I noticed in the pictures that we took at the Top Kart facility of some of their karts, their seats had multiple holes all over the place where you could tell they had tweaked it and moved it. So we'll have to figure that out.
So how fast does it go?
Don't know.
We were told on the straightaways, during the race, you'll get up to about 50.
Hmm?
Do you know that?
Cool.
Mhm.
I assume it's a multiple lap race.
Yeah, and I don't have all the specs on that, how many laps it is, I
think
haven't.
last year they ran about 20 laps
Yeah.
at it's a 900-foot straightaway is kind of what they've figured out. And then I'm sure it'll be a different configuration this year from last year, but you know, somewhere around a 900 to 1,000-foot straightaway. And then last year they ran 20 laps. This year probably be about the same. But yeah, we'll learn more on the specs. We'll talk to the guys next week too at the testing team.
Cool.
One of the things that I really like about this program is, I don't know if you caught that from the presentation, but only 40% of the team's overall score comes from how the kart does on the track. And I
Right.
think that's important to note that, yes, you want the kart to really, do well. Our goal is to beat Greenwood. But that's a long story. But it's important how the presentation goes, the marketing, the fundraising, all that counts. And so, in fact, it's more important than how the kart does on the track. So we're looking forward to it.